Okay, let's go ahead and generate a post for our own site. So I've found an AI-based article online. I'm going to copy that URL. I'm going to paste it here. Then in make.com, I'm going to hit run once for this. And what that's going to do is going to run through this entire chain to generate that blog. Okay, and coming back here, we're almost at the end of the process. It's uploaded an image. It's creating the post on WordPress right now. So if I go to the site here, we see we've got these articles here. If I hit refresh, we now have the new article here, which we can go into, we can check it out. So we have the featured posts that are created as part of that process. We have headings, content, but that's the flow. It's gone through, it's taken the URL, it's turned it into getting content, and has now created a post on my website for me. So why would you use this kind of system? Well, to me, there are a few main benefits. The first one, it's a huge time saving. If you're able to just provide a URL, synthesize all that content inside that URL, and then produce content at scale, well, that's huge to me. Along with that, it allows you to have a consistent style of messaging. So rather than building a blog and writing different blogs each week in potentially different tones and different styles, it allows you to have that consistent expert-led content, delivering that authoritative style content for yourself. Then, alongside that, it's optimized from an SEO perspective, helping get that visibility for your posts throughout your site. And ultimately, as I said, it's a scalable, repeatable workflow, meaning that you can just drop that URL in and it'll take care of the rest for you. So all it is a matter of is finding those URLs. So let's talk about how this actual process works and the sort of flow that it goes through. Now, as you saw, we put a URL in the Google Sheet. That's the trigger point. What that does is make.com sees that there's been a row added into that Google Sheet and starts the generation process. To begin this process, what it does is firstly obtain the text from that URL. So it actually needs to go to that page and obtain that information. With that information obtained, we can then go through and generate a relevant title. Now, this can be specified to yourself. So in my case, I'm having it write this content from the perspective of I'm an AI agency and producing that for my website. Whereas in your case, you'd want to personalize that to yourself. But that's producing us then a title for this blog post. With that title and the content to hand, we're able to then generate what we believe is going to be a good outline for this post. This includes an introduction, 3 to 5 sort of sections, and then a conclusion to finish off the article. With that post outline generated, we need to clean and convert that content so that it turns it into a usable format for Make to then go through each individual section and write content, which is what we're doing next. So for each post section, we need to generate the content. Firstly, we check to see, are all the sections generated to this point? If they're not, then great, let's go into this individual section and generate that blog content. So what we need to do before we can generate that content is get all the current content. That allows us to have a flowing, natural blog. There is an option to just generate blog content without any reference to what's been generated already in the article, but that leads to pretty poor outcomes. So what this is doing is it's getting that content that we've generated already, sending that in to then generate the current section's content. Once we've obtained that, we then save all the generated content so far for that blog into a little temporary area, and then repeat that process until we've finished all the blog sections. Once we have all the sections complete, we're generating a thumbnail image, we're uploading that image to the website, and then we're uploading all the content into into the website itself. Finally, to cap it all off, we're then updating the Google Sheet with the end URL so that the user is able to then go and preview the page if they'd like. And that's the entire process from start to finish. All hands off, just drop the URL in and it'll get it all the way through to being on the website. Okay, so before we get into Make and the actual full workflow that we need, we're going to need to set up a few different services. Now, the first service is OpenAI. That is, we need an LLM that we're going to call for content generation, post outline generation, that sort of stuff. So I recommend using just ChatGPT in this sort of case. And to set that up, if you haven't already set up an API key before, you just head to platform.openai.com. You need to log in and head to the dashboard here. And from dashboard, we want to go to API keys. And this will allow you then to create a new secret key, which you can give it a name. So in my case, I would go make.com, and that would then allow you to create that key. And you need to copy that key and just have that to hand, because during the make setup, it will be one of the key pieces that we need to include. Okay, next is DumplingAI. Now, DumplingAI is a tool that takes content and gets it ready from an LLM perspective. So for example, in our case, we're providing that URL. What it's doing is it's going to obtain the content from that page for us. So it makes that process really simple in this case. So what you need to do is you need to set up an account. You can get started for free, no credit card required. Super simple to set up, just hit get started and provide your details. And then once you're in the platform, you then simply head to the API keys section here on the left, generate a new secret API key, and have that to hand so that you're able to use that in Make itself. And the last part is getting the website connector going. So in my case, I'm going to be posting to a WordPress website, and Make have made that simple to do by providing a plugin called Make Connector. So search for Make Connector in the Add Plugins section, install it, activate it, and then in the left menu here, you'll get a tab for Make. So just simply click on that. And what that has here is an API key that you need to provide in the setup on Make side. So keep this to hand so that we're ready to go when we get up to that in Make. Okay, so make.com, it's the starting point. That's where we're doing all the automation in. So if you don't have an account, hit get started. It's quite simple to set up, just name, email, verification, that sort of stuff. But let's jump into then creating the actual scenario itself. So the scenario has this as the entire chain. And what it requires is for us to firstly set up the trigger to be based on Google Sheets watching for a new row. So if we click in here, what this is doing is we're defining firstly the Google Sheet itself, what sheet we're looking at, and then saying how many do we want to input and process at the same time. So in my case, I've just limited it to one so that it can do it in a row. But what that is it's in Google Sheets. I have this sheet here, which has a URL, which is the URL that we want to process, a working area, and we'll get to that a little bit later, and an output URL. And that URL is the end output. So if we click on that, we get redirected then to our website where we have the post and all the content that we can read through. So what it's doing is it's looking for any time a new row is added, and a new row is added by simply just putting in a URL. When a URL is then identified, we're setting up Dumpling to make a call. Now in our case, what we're using is in the Dumpling options, the scrape URL option. Here is where you would then add your API key and set up that connection. Beyond that, then you need to define things like the URL that we want to scrape. So in this case, it's the URL that we've just inputted into the Google Sheet. And providing clean data. We do want it to render JavaScript in this case because sometimes content is locked behind JavaScript. But this is something that you need to play around with the sites that you're typically inputting. It will then go through, obtain that content from the website, and that's when we then hit our first OpenAI call. So in this case, we're doing a completion request, a chat completion. We're going to be using, in this case, the GPT-4o model, and I've limited the tokens output to 1,000 tokens. So this is using a system prompt to basically try and get someone to provide a really targeted title around what we're looking for. And this is where you're going to have the most flexibility around turning this into what you need for your company, rather than copy and pasting what I have. So I have, you're a professional copywriter with expertise in SEO and AI technology. You're writing for myself, and this is what you're trying to target. This is your task. your task is to generate a natural human sounding article. And then I have a few different points that I want it to sort of work on in the title itself. The key ones though are to stay under 15 words because I don't want a super long title on my website. And also to only return the title text, not to include any other explanation or any other formatting. Because nothing worse than saying, here's my thoughts on the title, and then providing the title. We just want that title text. So with that prompt, we're then obtaining the title for the article that we're gonna have on our website. What we then want to do is figure out, well, what's that post content actually gonna look like? Now this is where you could, in theory, provide just a prompt saying, write a blog, but that's not gonna produce a very good outcome. So what we're doing here is we're actually getting to figure out, well, what should the blog look like from a reader's perspective? And then we're gonna go through and generate that. So in this case, again, we're using ChatGPT 4.0. And again, I've got the same sort of, you're an AI and SEO expert, all that sort of stuff. But the things that really matter in this is that we should begin with an introduction section, include 3 to 5 clearly structured sections then after that, and then we're going to end with a conclusion section. And that means we're going to end with around 5 to 7 sections within each blog post. Now that might be way too long for you and you want to reduce that down, that's fine. You can tweak this around however you need. What does matter though is that we're going to return the response in a valid JSON format. And this is the structure that we want. So what we want is an array of title summary. That is introduction and then a little summary about what this introduction is trying to convey. And the reason we're doing that is so that we can write this in little blocks. So we start with the introduction, then we start with the second block, third block, and I want to be able to tell a writer, hey, this block is about this kind of content with this title. And it helps just dictate to the content writer how they're going to actually do it. So then again, with that JSON format example, we also need to tell it, hey, only return the JSON output, don't include any additional wording because that will break things. Now, the typical output, if we just look at the output that's been created here in the choices, the output does do a pretty good job where it follows this square bracket and then curly brackets with the title, summary, and that sort of stuff. But the only problem that we get in this is ChatGPT likes to add this little JSON piece at the top with the markdown. And this is a problem for us. So what we do here is we basically just do a find replace. So we use the text parser with the replace option to find backticks, 3 backticks plus JSON, and we're replacing this with a space. It's important to include a space because if we include nothing here, it returns null as the option. In here, we're defining, hey, here's the text from the previous output that we need to use in this. And then we also look for 3 backticks, which is at the end of the content generated. We need to also find that. So then that's based on the previous module's text. So with those, if we now look at the output from that, we can see here it's just got square bracket, curly, and then curly brace. So it's cleaned basically. With that clean output, we're now parsing the JSON. So this is taking that end output and saying, hey, I believe this is JSON. I need you to just make sure it is and actually pass it in as, hey, here's the data that we're going to be using. And so with that JSON passed, we're then sending it into an array aggregator. And what that is doing is it's basically taking each of those blocks where it has the title summary, and turning them into numbered, ordered pieces. So instead of it just all being a big, long piece of content, it's now turning each of those blocks into individual items that we can use. And to use those, we send that into a repeater. Now the repeater starts with an initial value of 1, and you will leave that as 1. And what we're doing is we're sending in how long the array is. So if we knew every single time that it was going to be 5 sections long, you could actually just type the number 5 here. Now it is safer to use this length variable because it may change per post. But what that's going to do then is it's going to repeat whatever happens after this repeater call that number of times. Now we will be able to filter out when we get to the end, but let's start by going through each of these steps then. So the first thing it does inside the repeater is it gets a cell from a Google Sheet. And this cell in a Google Sheet is actually this working area. Now I said we're going to come back to the working area at the end, and this is the point that we're going to be doing that. So the working area is a temporary storage area for the blog. That is, as we build each section of the blog, we're going to be saving that blog back to that entry, which means we need to get the content first. So what we're doing here is we're going through the Google Sheet and we're going to obtain cell B and then whatever the row number is. So in this case, it would be B2. We're obtaining B2 and obtaining whatever content's in there at the moment. So on the first generation, that's going to be empty. But as we go through, we then generate the content and then we're going to save it. And so the next time we come around to the repeater, there is going to be content there. And so that's where we then need to use that in this prompt here. So this prompt is generating just this section's content. So again, we have things like you're a professional blog writer, you're writing for me, your task is to write content for this specific section of this blog. You need to make sure it maintains a natural flow, avoids repeating previous sections, use a consistent tone style, sound helpful and trustworthy, be written clearly and accessible for non-techs, include helpful insights, be aware that this blog is for search, and then defines around headings. Now headings, you need to make sure that you have this sort of content in here because otherwise it will want to use Markdown where it'll put ###, and that's really not useful. So what you need to do in order to get headings in your content is define, hey, you need to start this section with a H2 and then any further subheadings use H3s. And then we need to make sure we return this as a plain text. Don't use any Markdown. Don't try and include any triple backticks, no code fences, all that sort of stuff. We just want the plain text here. Now you will be provided the content of the blog so far, the section title and the summary that we're currently writing for, the blog's full title, and the reference content that we obtained from Dumpling at the very start. And if we look at the user's message then, we have here the blog so far, and that's from the call from Google Sheets. We have the section title, which is from the array aggregator, sending in the current number that we're working on. So within the array here, just to give this further context, in the array here, we have that there's a title and a summary. But what there is in this array is actually 6 items. And so this I is saying in the repeater process, we're working on the first row or the second row. And so when you add in, say, the title here, it doesn't have reference to which number row you're working on at the moment. So you actually have to go in between these square brackets and add the I, which is the current row number, in. And that will then allow it to say, oh, it's the first title or the second summary. So make sure you add the I in there. Along with that, we have the title that was generated. So this is from back at the start, all the way back here. And again, at the very end there, we had also the content from Dumpling. So if I scroll back down, this is the inspiration content, and this is what we picked up from the content from Dumpling itself. With all of that obtained, it will then go through, run the generation and create it. And then we need to save that value into the Google Sheet. Unfortunately, in make.com, when you're going through a repeater process like this, there isn't a way to store a value temporary that can be added upon. So using Google Sheets as a get and save process is the best option that I could see to hand. So to do this, what we're doing is we need to send in, here's the current content we had already generated, plus here's the new content that we just generated. And so if we actually go back to this Google Sheet and I expand the height of this row, we can actually see here the content generated that is on the blog itself. And this is done in content sections. So we can see here how it's the introduction first, and then we have a few H3s, so they're subheadings, and then we have another H2, so that's another section's content then. And so it goes through and saves that and saves it, and it does it multiple times. So we can actually see that if we view the operations here. So the first call was empty, and that's because there is no content to start with. The second call, there was a value, which is the first section. And then if we go to operation 3, there's a value which is the first section again. So we can see here the path forward. And then the second section that was generated. And so that's just added on to each time, one by one. What we're then doing is that process, those 3 pieces are being repeated 6 times. And we have this little filter here on the end. So you click here to add a filter. And this is basically to define that the repeater is finished. And this is checked by having the I value when it's equal to the length, which is this value here. So when it's equal to 6, that means that the repeater process is done and we can continue on the rest of the sequence. From there, we are going to generate a thumbnail, and this really you can vary a fair bit. Now I've given a structured prompt around like you're a creative director, your job is to create a blog featured image based on the title. The image should follow XYZ pieces, keep the description concise and visual, and then provided the article title, which is we generated at the start. This is something that you can absolutely play around with, and there is a lot of different options, a lot of different scope on it, but this is just what I've gone with for my case. And so with the image generated, we're then going to create the image to WordPress itself. Now one piece, sorry, I forgot to mention on the thumbnail generation itself is whilst we've got that prompt, what we do need to define for WordPress uploading specifically is that the response format is image file. By default, this will start as a URL. We actually need this to be an image file. So make sure that's not even visible to start with. Make sure you turn on the advanced settings and then go to image file for that. So with that created, we then map this to the WordPress website. So this is where you would then define that API key. You would add that API key here. And we need to map the output. So by default, the file name that OpenAI creates is just output1.png. So you do want to change that file name. So in my case, what I'm using is the title of the article .png. I'm also using that title in the title of the image, and the data will just be the response image data that's sent through from OpenAI. So that's then uploaded the image. We then need to create the post on WordPress as well. So in my case, I've just gone for super basic values. We have the title again, that's from the very start. We have the last piece that was generated in this generation process, as well as the value of the article. So this is basically saying this was the 5th pull. This has the 5 pieces of the blog created, and then this was the 6th one that was created at the end. And so we combine those 2 together to create the end content that's uploaded to the post. In my case, we're using the post variable as the type. I'm not going to define any dates. You could set things up to make it much more complex in like scheduling in the future. All I'm doing in my case is I'm then just publishing it. I'm not defining any like categories or anything like that. And the featured media ID. So that we need to take from the previous generation by just selecting the media item ID here. And with that all done, we then have the WordPress post created. It's on the website now, it is live. The only thing I'm then doing is updating the Google Sheet to say, hey, here's the post itself. And we do that by providing back the post ID from the create post process, defining that it's this row number, which we're obtaining from the very beginning, where we pick up what row was this that pulled from, and updating the output URL. So in this case, because it's a WordPress website, I can just add the URL plus $P equals, and that will give me the end URL and redirect me to the correct page. And that is an overall flow of the entire make process in order to take it from a URL and bring it onto a WordPress website. And so that's it, that's the whole process. Now there's obviously a lot to make.com, lots of steps that it goes through, but honestly it gets to a great end output. Taking from just a URL, getting to your own blog, I love it personally. There are also a lot of different options. There's things like different featured image generators out there. OpenAI is just one, and that you can get some great end outputs. Honestly, taking this whole process and using it for other formats as well is another great opportunity. But this is a good starting point to get content marketing going and flowing through a lot easier. Now, this is something that we do at AIWise, and if you're ever looking at automation or anything around those sort of realms, please don't hesitate to reach out. Head to AIWise.com.au and find out more. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you at the next one.